Welcome. This is our slideshow that we started off trying to convey the big picture to one of our customers. And as you'll see, we've actually taken a section of the actual conversation and recorded it while we were talking with the customer. We did want to fix up kind of the intro and the end just so you'd kind of know where you were on this. This was originally titled ePublisher Concepts. So what we're covered in here is we went over, the idea was to go over the WebWorks workflow, factory concept, and the format concepts. A lot of this came out of some of the things we did in preparation for Roundup, where it became really obvious that there were some ideas that we hadn't conveyed to our customers, and it was really amazing how much it helped them understand what we were trying to do by getting that out there in front of them. And we started off WebWorks workflow.
WebWorks workflow, we just kind of started this off at Roundup when you've seen this before, but we talked about your content, your way, every time, and that helps give us focus as far as what part do we what are we really delivering to customers. And if you kind of just take this all the way around, again, we just refer that to the WebWorks workflow. Your content being your source, word frame, whatever. Your way is usually your master projects, and then those get converted to stationary so that you get to capture everything you want, business logic, formatting, styles. And then every time has to do with the delivery side. Delivery being delivered as to do with Express on desktops or Automap on a schedule, that kind of thing. So that's real quick on that. Next part is just factory concept. And the main thing we want to talk about here is the difference between works of art versus mass production. Basically, we kind of view to some extent, Publisher 2003 kind of did some mass production pieces, but it also kind of got into this case of when you built a project, you would put a lot of effort into a single project, and you would have trouble trying to reapply that project somewhere else, or you had to go and recreate the projects or redo them from scratch almost. And so it's just kind of like painting a picture where you can make a great piece of art here, but you would get this from one painter, and then you might get this from yet another person who was working trying to do a deliverable for you. And then finally, you could also run into these cases where if this person just didn't have a clue what they were doing, you were really in trouble. So the big points here are that when you're dealing with this kind of a workflow, individual contributions, your best worker only gets to make one thing better. The other part is, too, that worker, every worker who does anything has to know the whole system front to back. And that kind of limits who can do that well, and even mentally who can you pick to set up on those processes. And the final part, too, is on when you talk about your deliverables, it's very hard to measure the quality of what you're getting. Unless you look at every single piece that comes out of the system, you're not going to get what you need. And then, of course, you can't even tell what the progress is. How far along are we? Because some people do it quickly, or they have different styles or different ways of operating, and there's really no way to say, all right, I'm 20% done or I'm 60% done. Of course, if we're talking about factories, hey, they take away some choices for things, but they kind of break down the problems so you can get into some of these consistent pieces. And one of the great parts about it are I can take my best worker and allow them to have an impact across my whole organization. The other part is those workers can be specialized. They don't have to understand the entire process or the details, intimate details of every single part of the process. They can just focus on the one thing they're good at. And again, they just don't have to know everything. The other part of this process is, how do I ensure quality? How do I ensure my results? The way we do it is we don't test the outputs, we test the production line. We test that process, make sure the process is consistent. Once the process is consistent, we know we don't have to worry about what we're going to get out on the other end. And the final mark of this is that we actually break down this process into a set of assembly lines and stations to do work. This last bit is actually the most important change coming from from Publisher 2003 over to ePublisher. Publisher 2003 did do some things to kind of let you set up a process, test it out, and then roll it out with some degree of consistency. But it still required someone who understood absolutely everything that was going on in the system. ePublisher gives a way to kind of break that process down a little further so that you're not responsible for the entire thing. And of course, we know there's benefits if you can get to this factory concept. It's reproducible, you can add on things, measurable, manageable, scalable, all that good stuff. Okay, talking pretty quick, apologize, but I know you guys are familiar with some of this. So now we kind of know, hey, what we're trying to go for. How is the factory concept really realized in ePublisher? In ePublisher, we use formats, and again, those are analogous to a factory. And just as the factory builds a particular product, a format's going to build a particular output. So an example might be in a factory, we take in raw materials, we're going to build the automobile view. We say, okay, we're going to have an assembly that makes parts for us. We'll have an next assembly line or place that goes and assembles the cars. It's going to take all those parts and start assembling the cars. And the final bit is we're going to go and paint them and push them out the back end. So you can actually draw this up and see it and draw a nice pretty picture of that. And actually you don't have to worry about what goes on inside those buildings. Again, when you design them, you just say, how do things flow through the system? And I don't have to worry about how many, and I don't even have to worry about how it's actually going to get done. That's the responsibility of getting the work done is actually handled by individual stations within those assembly lines. And that also means that there are individual tools and assembly lines, and if I decide later on I need to move them somewhere else, I can actually reassign them. If that improves my workflow, or if that makes the responsibilities clear. So in ePublisher, what we're doing is, again, if factories have assembly lines and stations, what would be the analogous entries in ePublisher? We refer to these as pipelines and stages. And so in a pipeline, you basically identify, use some XML to identify, hey, this is what I want to build. And then inside that, use a little more XML to identify, hey, this is the stage. This is what I want to occur at this station. The workflow, again, you design that high level. And the way you...
Go back to that last slide for a bit.
Sure.
That's actually on our interest with that one.
Okay, good.
And particularly how you're using XSLs to
This is calling a particular XSL file based on where you are in the factory.
That's correct. That's correct. What we're doing is we are specifying. You specify a factory, and when we load that memory, we'll parse through and we'll say, hey, what are the assembly lines we need to process? What order do they need to be executed in? And what are the individual stations we should do? And once we figure that out, then we just start turning the crank. And we turn the crank and execute to completion. And when we're done, we should have whatever deliverable we need there. Okay? Well, this is the part we're going to go into.
right, and that is certainly an extremely interesting part for what we're most interested in now at this point.
Right. Okay. Yes. This will allow us to do things like some of the index marker requests that you have. You'll see how that's going to play in here.
Yeah, that's good, because in the past, what you were doing was not transparent enough for us to identify the stage, and I'm assuming it's going to be a little bit easier.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So, again, format and factory will define the workflow. We now know where our assembly lines are. We know where the pipelines are. We know where the stages occur. We still haven't talked about we haven't talked about what are the inputs and outputs to the system. And if you look at factories, though, the concept they use for that, I believe, is what I call type-based processing. Probably a better term for it, but until we get that, this is what we use. And the way it works is basically you just mark everything. You mark everything you want to process. You don't say something along the lines of, "Hey, I've got a car on the assembly line, and this is car QXZ." You don't say, "Hey, paint station, go paint car QXZ red." That's too complicated. The guys on the other end don't care. They say, "Look, if you want it marked red, put a big R on it, and when it gets over to the paint facility, we'll paint it red." And we're really glad that you guys know the specific individual vehicle identification number for that car. That's really wonderful, but it doesn't make any difference to us when we're doing our job in the paint facility, which is just tell us what we need to know. This also simplifies certain things. If you look at this picture, I can actually push all the cars on the same conveyor belt. They're going down the same assembly. And they can all pass through the paint them red, the paint them green, and the paint them blue assembly line points. I don't have to not put them through there. It's fine for them to pass through because as the car passes through the red assembly station, they'll say, "Okay, well, they're marked red, I'll paint you red. And if you don't have an R on you, if you're not marked for me, then I won't do anything." That's okay. It's more complicated to try and route them around the stations than it is to just send them through and let the stations make the correct determination as to how to process them. And what you get from this, though, is that it's really scalable. On this picture, I could run 2 cars, 1 car, or 1,000,000 cars through this, and it would work. And in the same way, it makes ePublisher format scalable, where once you have that process working for 1 or 2 documents, you can now run as many documents as you want through the system.
So that part ends rather abruptly. Apologize for that, but I think you get a feel for what we're trying, some of the messages and ideas that we need to get across to customers. And for this particular part, this was the initial slides and the initial work that was done to put that out there. We clearly understand and know there's a whole world of concepts that we need to convey and give the customers the big picture so that they don't get hung up on the details, that they can actually have a map to find their own answers in that, and even have their own conversations with other customers who are trying to achieve those same goals. And it really removes quadralay and WebWorks from being this central bottleneck to how ideas, what are the best ideas to move ePublisher and the platform forward. Thank you.